Alright folks, we are back for part 3 of the finishing up of winemaking, and you can see the wine has been sitting for about 10-11 days now. It's separated and clarified a bit, sediment at the bottom, the wine's nice and purple, and we pulled out a sample here into our test tube and spun our hydrometer in it. And what we'll notice here is that the hydrometer is now all the way at the top of, where to go, all the way at the top of that mark, just by 990, so maybe 992, which means that it's completely done fermenting and off-gassing and all of that. And that means that it's time to kind of separate this and re-rack it, meaning that we are going to take the clear wine out of here and siphon it and pump it in back to the bucket to hold it for a moment while we clean. I don't have 2 big bottles, just one, so I'm not going to rack it from one to the other, but we need to get this separated. So I'm going to put it into a bucket, the same bucket we used before, clean this one out, get all the stuff out of it, re-sanitize it with our Star San sanitizer, and when that stuff's out there, then I'll just siphon it right back in again, and we're going to put some of the stuff in there that keeps all the bad stuff out. One more last dose of that, and we're going to teach you how we're going to clarify it. We'll come back to that in just a second. All right, it's going to be a little tricky to do with one hand, so I'm propping the camera up to finish this. Don't have a helper today. We're down to removing this wine except for the sediment at the bottom, and we're going to siphon it into this bucket. I have cleaned the entire bucket and all this gear inside and out with our Star San cleaner, and this is just basically a siphon tube we're going to put down in here and get a little pump action going on it, and that just starts the wine siphoning down or pumping into the bucket. And because the bottom of the bucket is lower than this, it's just going to siphon and keep going. If I need it to help, I'll just pump it a little bit, and it's just going to suck it through. My tube is not super long. There we go. See this? It's kind of going down here all the way into, then it's just running out into the bucket. Yeah, just running all down into the bucket. Tube is slightly lower than the jar, so the siphon action's working. It's going to be kind of slow though because it's not a longer tube. All right, we're getting close now. Sediment's all there at the bottom. Just getting the rest of this. You can see it just pouring out of there. Can be done pretty quickly. I tipped it so we can get to the rest of this juice, but just making sure I don't get the tip of this down in that sediment. All right, we've got it done. We've got it all in the bucket. Just note, I think a longer tube for siphoning and a helper or someone would make this way easier, so that I didn't have to think so much about it and hold one thing and siphon another. You can see I had to move the bottle around a little bit too much, and the wine, the top started to get a little foggy with sediment. I don't want that in the wine, and I don't have time to let this settle apart for another 6 days or whatever, just so I can get that last, I don't know, half a bottle of wine or whatever. So I'm going to probably end up losing that and dump it. So I'm going to clean this out next, dump this out, and clean it. All right, our carboy is clean, and it is re-sanitized, and we've re-sanitized a cup. I'm not going to pour this big bucket because I'll probably spill it, but we're going to pour all this wine back into this carboy now that it's all separated from the stuff at the bottom, the sediment, and we can let it finish its last racking. So I am simply going to grab a scoop of this at a time and bring it over to here. Now you notice that this is definitely clearer than before and purple. It's going to look a little bit foggy, but not like before. And we're going to put some more of that sanitizing tablets in here that we did before to help with all the oxidization and any kind of exposure it's had during this process. It'll kill all that off. It'll deal with the air in the bottle. And then last but not least, oh, don't spill, buddy. We are going to add a clarifying agent. Now there's different types of clarifying agents out there. There's little chemicals and things you can buy, but it turns out the most popular trick major wine distilleries or wine bottlers and home users do is use egg white, and we'll do that here in a second. All right, we got the wine in the bottle. As you can see, it's got stirred up a little bit. It doesn't look quite as dark red as it was before. That's fine. There's gonna be one more last settling here. And we do need to sterilize it a bit. So we've got those tablets again, the Campton tablets, 3 gallons. So I'm gonna use 3 of those. I'm gonna use a little mint muddler, drink maker here, and just crush those into a powder. And we're gonna stir that up and make sure it mixes really well. We don't want any clumps in the drink, in the wine. And we're gonna go mix this with some hot water. All right, we got about a 1/4 cup of hot water. This stuff dissolves really easily. It's basically gone. Pro tip really quick, again, I poured through the funnel with the scoop to get the wine in there. If I had a longer tube, I would have used the siphon and it would have caused a lot less churn and been easier. So use the siphon if you can. We're just gonna add this Campton down into the wine. There we go. No problem. Next, we are going to use some egg whites. So as we read online, it turns out that egg whites have properties that pull anything suspended in the liquid down to the bottom easier. So even though it can sit and clarify real well, there's always the potential of just a little bit more stuff sitting there than you want. And then when you go to bottle it, it's not as perfectly clear as you want, and then people don't think you have wonderful wine, even though you might. And so, again, there's chemicals people use, but egg whites is the easy home trick. 1 egg white, if I'm reading correctly, could probably do 5-6 gallons. I've got about 3 now, so I'm going to separate this and the egg white of 1 egg and mix it with just a little bit of water to thin it out, a pinch of salt, and put it in there, but I'm not going to pour it all in because I don't need the whole egg. All right, so there we go. We got an egg white, a little bit of warm water, dash of salt, whip it up and thin it out real good. We're not trying to turn it into a meringue, so don't go crazy. Just gonna thin it out. And again, the particles in there have, the reason they hang in the suspension is some positive and negative charges to the particles and make them hang. And the egg white neutralizes all that, clings to those particles, and lets them go all the way to the bottom. But doesn't change the taste of the wine. And it has the added property of bringing some of the bitterness and some of the tannin dryness out of the wine and taking it out as well. At this point, I'm okay with that. All right, so there we go. So we've got both of those in there. I did make the mistake of just pouring the entire egg white in there, even though I said I only needed about half of it. So hopefully that doesn't hurt things too bad. All right, next up, we need to make sure that stuff's mixed together really well. I have this stick that I don't feel is quite long enough that I want to use for stirring down at the bottom. So I'm gonna actually use this big, huge, elongated bottle cleaning brush. It's been completely sterilized with the Star Sand, and I'm just gonna use that to stir all of that egg white and the Campton really well. And this is something you want to probably mix together for quite a while. They have little drill bits and other things that people use for this, because that Campton is going to start causing some off-gassing. And this is something you probably want to stir for a while to get all the gas out of here that you possibly can. Or buy one of those big, long kind of drill bits that go down in here and turn into a whip, kind of a flexible whip, and you could do it much quicker. But we're going to do this for a while. We stirred this around for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Of course, with the drill kit thing they have you do that for a long time, going backwards and forwards, 3, 4 minutes to get all the degassing out. That's 6 gallons, this is 3 gallons. And that degassing, again, is because we put those Campton tablets and the egg white and all that stuff in there. It can create gas. There's different methods to degas, and that's to stir it like crazy before you go and let this sit. Letting it sit can degas on its own. I did the brush thing for a while, but I read another method, and that is if you have one of these wine stopper devices hooked to a vacuum sealer, which this one does, you can use that. When you use one of these, it pulls all the CO2 to the surface and pulls it out like you would if you were sealing a bottle. I MacGyvered this a little bit, and I took the bung plug from one of these, which has a hole. I've taped that after I pushed the pressure on between this green seal and the bung plug and taped it, and I'm hoping that holds airtight for a while as I begin to do a handheld vacuum. And this would probably take a while because you got all this air to pull out plus the CO2. So I'm gonna let this run for a minute and see when it stops. Okay, the suction method did work. It pulled all this white bubble stuff to the surface. It did indeed create a suction in here. And when I pulled that thing out of there, all this air sucked in really loudly. So in fact, if that does pull the air out and does degas it quicker, then that is done now. I could tell also because I ran the cycle again and it stopped almost immediately, knowing that, again, all the air was sucked out of there already out of the jar. So that's one method you can use. At this point now, with the degassing done and the stuff mixed into it, we're simply going to cap this off with a bung plug again and then go put it away for a couple weeks to clarify. One thing about the bung plug I did wrong at the very beginning, and it's not the end of the world, but when I put this in here before, this lid comes with it and it's got these little teeny holes on it to let gas out. I simply had it like this so the gas could come out. And also, you can pour this half full of water, that sanitizing Star San cleaning water, therefore ensures with a water seal, again, type of water and cleaner that bacteria wouldn't want to go through, that nothing can get through this whole process and down into your wine bottle. I simply had it sitting loose, which is also sealed a little bit, but not quite as wonderful as this. So between the lid, having teeny air holes, between the water, I could have let this, while it was sitting here over the last 7 or 11 days, I could have had it maybe sealed even better. I think it was protected based on where it was, but this time I'm adding that to it while it's plugged here. So off we go back to, well, I'm just going to set over here in the house where it's going to stay at mid-70s like it's supposed to for 14 days.